Overlord is a very strange concoction because it is a war movie, but it is a horror film. It's an action movie, but it's also a drama. It's got a big heart. It's actually very funny. It's all these bizarre things in one package, and I think Julius approached it from a point of view that allowed me to see they could all coexist. Billy Ray wrote an incredible script. It just felt to me like if Rod Serling were still here and still writing, that this is the kind of thing that he would have written. And it was intense, and it was funny, and it was full of characters and action and drama. And I remember reading that whole script, and it was just such a kind of horror thrill ride that I knew it was something that in the right hands could be really fun and creepy and bizarre. And I love the vibe of it, and I love the characters in it. And so it was it all just started with that script. Then Lindsay Weber and I developed it with Julius Avery, the director, and I think he's really done an incredible job. I think the thing that I loved the most about the premise was that it took a sort of classic World War II adventure movie and it smashed it into a sort of monster horror film. And the idea of those two coexisting just felt like it could be an incredibly intense and fun ride. And the thing about, a war story is you don't need more monsters than humans in that world. The horrors of war are already there. And so what's weird is that, you suddenly get into this sort of, freakish sort of fantasy horror level, and it doesn't feel like that much of a stretch. And I think that what I felt reading the script was that it could be, in some cases, beautiful, in other cases, as intense as a straight war movie. But that it also had the potential of going to a place that was, clearly, in the realm of horror science fiction. And I just thought that combination, done right, could really hit the sweet spot. I think one of the things that we try to do at Bad Robot on genre stories is tell stories that are as much about the people and the characters as possible, but they often go into places and things happen that are clearly impossible, clearly extreme, clearly horrific and freaky and bizarre. And while not everything we do, has monsters in it, this one does. And I feel like monster movies are great and best when you believe the situation, you believe the characters, you're truly invested, and you get something that is, while rationally impossible, because you love the characters, because you relate to them, you believe the world, you believe the situation, and it's that much scarier. What I loved about Joyce's approach to the movie is that he looked at it as if it were a mission movie, a war movie, that goes to a place that is really freakish and really scary. He really got the feeling of what the opening needed to be to set the table for then what becomes, I think, an incredibly bizarre, creepy, and freaky film. But I love that he was coming into it from a place that I'd want to keep watching it just, as a war film, as a thriller, as an action movie. We knew that the character of Ford had to be someone that both intimidated you on some level, but also is the guy you'd want as part of your team if you were going to be, parachuting into occupied France. And when we saw Wyatt Russell, he had all the qualities because he's a very likable guy, and comes across, really kind of in a lovely way. But he does have an undeniable strength and intensity and sort of toughness. And so he was someone that we got really excited about. We needed to really feel like, I believe this guy's a soldier. I believe what he's been through. He's a tough-ass, guy, and yet I can't help but respect him. And it's harder to find that combination of things than you might think. We knew we needed a character in Boyce who was the audience, essentially. Someone you'd really relate to, that you'd watch and feel like, I'd be that afraid. I'd be that unsure. I'd be that, concerned. And we looked at a lot of different people. And Javon Adepo came in, and he just was so, he was so good. He was relatable. He was smart. He had a great sense of kind of, depth to his character. You believe that you could see that he was a guy that was like, found himself suddenly in battle, in the middle of a war. And you could imagine he was just a normal kid, days ago. And now he's like a soldier in the middle of stuff he can't fathom. And of course, it gets crazier and weirder, and as the story goes on. With Chloe, we needed, this was sort of like, the farm girl that they come across, like in an archetypical way. But of course, she needed to be much more than that. She needed to be someone who was, raising her family, who was putting up with living in this Nazi-occupied village. She needed to be basically a surrogate parent to her little brother, Paul. She needed to be someone who, given the circumstances of the movie, had to stand up for herself, had to defend herself, had to become, as intense and vicious, and despite being terrified, as strong as she could ever imagine and beyond. We found Mathilde Olivier, and she was not only, strong and believable and lovely, but also she had a great sense of humor. She had a great, she held the screen, like the best of them. I think she's someone who just sort of commands the screen, is great to watch. She's an amazing actress, French actress. The villain is sort of famously always the most fun character to play, and I think that Pilou, he takes on this character of Waffner in a way that is, it's definitely this, he's so good, and it's got this larger-than-life vibe, but it doesn't feel scenery chewy. It's not like he's sort of overdoing it. I think that the fun of this guy is he's so intense, and he's so wicked, and he's so, he just seems to have this kind of, not just a cold heart, but this kind of terrifying ambition. The most important thing with any ensemble, and this certainly is one, is how do they all work together? You had a lot of people that you had to sort of keep track of, and it was just important that everyone stand out, have their own distinct personality, and I do think you really follow each one of them and have a sense of their personalities individually by the end of the movie. But of course, having the group was really important. You needed to believe that they, had been, in some cases, fighting together before, in other cases, in this group for the first time, but you needed to get you needed to feel their energy and their dynamic, and we were very lucky with this cast. One of the things I think about Overlord that's especially cool is how the movie looks and feels. It's got a big and beautiful production vibe, and part of that is like the set designs that John Henson did, and some of it is the fact that we were on these really awesome locations. The village that they go to, Ciel Blanc, which, while it was a set that was built, has, I think, an incredible look and feel to it. And when they go into the lair underneath the church on the hill, what you find down below, it really is creepy and terrifying, kind of maze of labs that you find underground. I just think it was beautifully built, incredibly done, and wonderfully shot. So I think we're really lucky that the production looks as good as it does on a movie that is as scary and genre specific as it is. If you go to see Overlord, what you're going to get is an incredibly fun, thrilling, terrifying, weird, freaky, bizarre, sweet, and ultimately wildly satisfying roller coaster ride.